We're a little fired up here today at Capture the Concept because we use these drones. We use them for good. We use them to get footage for our customers. We use them to bring business and commerce to the state of Connecticut. Our friends at the legislature and our governor has passed a bill number 7066, that starting in October makes our life very, very difficult flying a drone. In fact, almost impossible in some cases. It looks like this drone legislation was slipped in, I don't know if at the last minute, but most of the bill is concerning interactions between school personnel and immigration authorities and grants to certain nonprofit organizations and student athlete compensation. And then there's a few pages about drones, about purchase of drones. So for state entities and municipalities purchasing Chinese drones, which, okay, we're not that, so we'll let them fight that battle. But also things like attaching weapons to drones, which is federally illegal. But really the thing that has us a bit perturbed here is no person shall operate any unmanned aircraft or program an unmanned aircraft to operate at a height of less than 250 feet above ground level of a critical infrastructure facility or within 100 horizontal feet of a critical infrastructure facility, or in the case of a tunnel, inside such a tunnel, or any use of blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on and on. Now, you might say, well, yeah, we don't want drones operating in critical infrastructure. Well, there's two problems to that. One is the definition of critical infrastructure in this bill. And two is that state government has no jurisdiction over this. Now, there's a plane going over, which is kind of apropos to what we're talking about, because that plane is governed under the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. The state government has no governance of the air whatsoever. Now, what they can tell me is where I can and cannot take this drone off. So if I'm on state land, for example, I'm in the side of a road on a sidewalk, the state and local government can tell me you can't take off and fly from there. However, if I'm flying from my front yard and I take this drone off, as long as I'm flying within the FAA's guidelines under Part 107 as a commercial pilot, I'm not breaking any rules. So the other piece that I talked about critical infrastructure and the definition of it, some of these make sense, but the very first one is a real problem. Critical infrastructure facility means A, the following types of properties, provided any such property is completely enclosed by a fence or other physical barrier that is clearly designed to exclude intruders from such property. So basically what this says is if I'm out flying my drone, and let's say I'm flying over this building, this is private property I'm standing on, and I'm flying around this building, I have visual line of sight, FLOS, I have a spotter, I'm doing everything the FAA tells me I have to do. And I'm flying around this building, and I happen to go behind the building, I still can see the drone, but I'm traversing someone's yard that has a fence, that has a no trespassing sign. That means that a state or local law enforcement official can show up here and charge me with a Class A misdemeanor. Now I have to try to figure out everywhere I'm going that it isn't adjacent to something that may or may not have a fence around it. That's crazy. Now it goes on to talk about telecommunications infrastructure, electrical substations, it's surveillance and stuff. This stuff is not governed by our state government, our state or local government. If I'm flying, I'm doing a flight and I can go, let's say, half a mile and I still see the drone going down and circling back. And there happens to be a small 100 foot by 100 foot electrical substation that I'm traversing over because I'm flying over my neighborhood and flying back. Technically, I could also be charged with a Class A misdemeanor. And they say, well, if you're Part 107, if you're a certified pilot, which I am, if you have the correct approvals, you're okay. There is no approval to fly over my neighborhood as long as I'm in visual line of sight, not flying over people. There's a list of things, rules that the FAA does say you can't do. As long as I'm not doing those things, I'm just taking a flight and I can see the drone. There is no approval process. I can't go, when am I going to go to the substation, have them sign a paper? So this is just, it's another example of, it's just completely unenforceable. And it's going to affect our business. A big portion of our business is every commercial we do, every piece of video production, social. We have multiple drones. They're all properly registered. We're properly licensed. They're insured. They're liability insured. But yet, I could still be tried with a Class A misdemeanor that won't hold up, but I have to pay for a lawyer to essentially defeat this law. So it's very frustrating. So I know there are going to be people who say, I don't like drones. They're a privacy problem. You know, my neighbor bought one on Amazon and it flies it over my backyard all the time. They're a nuisance. We shouldn't have them over our electrical substations, our rivers, our dams, our bridges, which is a lot of stuff that's here, which we can traverse accidentally. And I get that. I don't want someone hovering in my backyard. Notice I said hovering above my head, looking down at me when I'm in my backyard. Nobody does. Most people with drones are not doing that. We're out there operating safely. We know the rules. We know the laws. How could the state government actually prevent flight over some of these important areas that are important to our infrastructure if we were worried about someone doing something nefarious? Well, there's actually a process for that. You can get what's called a TFR, or temporary flight restriction. Essentially, it makes a particular area a restricted flight area. Every time I go to fly, I pull up my iPad and I look, make sure there's no TFR. What might a TFR be? Let's say the president's in town. Let's say a dignitary's in town. Let's say there's some sort of natural disaster. Did you know there's a TFR for every major sporting event? The Super Bowl. I can't just go fly this over a Giants game in New York. It's a TFR. I will be federally prosecuted. And you can also, if you work with the FAA, get a restricted area. And there's restricted areas. For example, down in Washington, D.C., there's a TFR basically around all of D.C. That's the proper way to do this. Disney World has had a TFR for 20 years. You can't fly your drone at Disney World. That's the way to do it, through the FAA, not through legislation that's going to have me get a Class A misdemeanor on my record for trying to do my job safely and to the letter of the federal law. I don't think there's malice here. I don't think our lawmakers said, let's just try to, really take advantage and mess with our small businesses who do video work and drone work, or just hobbyists who like to fly their drone. I think it's just completely stems from New Jersey. We had those drone sightings that everybody was freaking out about. People get very concerned about privacy, and people rightly gets concerned about our critical infrastructure. The world's a crazy place, especially right now. I get it. We don't want our vulnerabilities in our critical infrastructure. But planes fly over that critical infrastructure. This doesn't say anything about planes. I have a 7x zoom, which, I don't know, something like 200 millimeter zoom range. So if I were to go 250 feet above, which is what it says, I can see everything on that critical infrastructure. Everything. This bill should be amended. The drone legislation should be removed, and it should be deferred to the FAA. And TFRs, or permanent restricted zones, should be added. And I touched on it before, but if you're a local municipality, law enforcement, you probably have at least one of these drones. These PDs use these drones to catch bad guys, to find missing persons, missing animals. Those agencies are first no longer able to buy any Chinese drone. Now, this is a DJI, which is the #1 drone manufacturer, probably in the world, but definitely around here. So what they may have spent $100,000 on multiple drones. There's ones way better than this. At first, you're not going to be able to buy them. And then the next deadline, you're not going to be able to fly them. And many states are doing this. And the concern is that somehow this is transmitting back to China. I'm a former IT guy. I have concerns all the time about cybersecurity. But I can tell you we have bigger problems. And I would much rather find the bad guy, find the missing person, than be concerned about a drone that is literally getting the same pictures that Google Earth and satellite imagery is getting. and a plane flying over is getting. The planes that are flying over my head right now, nearby the airport, are at 200 feet. Our lawmakers, or if you're in the drone community, please take another look at this. This is going to affect our business. We're going to have to turn down customers. We're going to have to be nervous that we're going to be arrested if we go out and fly and just happen to be adjacent to something that has a fence around it, or is a bridge, or has a railroad track or a railroad station. Even if we're not flying over any people, if it's there and it's deemed critical infrastructure, I guess we're breaking the law, even though this law cannot be enforced. The state of Connecticut has zero enforcement of this. The airspace is governed by the FAA. The ground I stand on is governed by the state and local government. So if you need any drone work until October 1st, 2025, when this goes into effect, we can do it without being nervous about being arrested. But after that, I don't know. We may have to find another arm of our business to supplement and pay our employees and give commerce back to the state of Connecticut. So this just goes to show you, when you pass something like this, you're affecting a lot of people. So be cognizant. Don't just slip it into a bill. I mean, nobody's even heard about this, even in the drone community. People I talk to, municipalities, police officers, people have not heard about this. And it's law. Anyway, I hope you have a nice day. I hope you learned something. If you need video work, drone work, capture the concept, Farmington, Connecticut. Thank you.